Take a bite of chocolate. Or a sip of coffee. And I've just exposed myself to literally more than 1,000 compounds. In this case, pretty well naturally occurring. So you can imagine the total number of compounds that we would be exposed to just from our food during a day. Thousands and thousands of compounds. Now add to this the possible exposure to some 40,000 synthetic chemicals that are used in everything from paints to cosmetics and as food additives. And these find their way into our body through food, through water, through the air, and through dust. Now, of course, some of these compounds in the laboratory, in cell cultures or in animal trials, have shown toxicity, carcinogenicity, or perhaps hormonal disruption, albeit at much higher doses than to what we would normally be exposed. Still, obviously, we do want to minimize exposure to any sort of substance that is of concern. And we especially want to do that during pregnancy, because when the embryo is forming, it is much more susceptible to any kind of chemical attack. So in a very interesting study, researchers looked at urine samples from 171 pregnant women and found that over half of these samples had at least 30 compounds which were of some concern, at least in laboratory studies. But here is the issue. The presence of a chemical cannot be equated to the presence of risk. In order to determine whether or not such exposure is risky is excruciatingly difficult, because what one would have to do would be to follow the children born to these mothers for a long time, for decades, and monitor their health status to see if there was any link between their medical problems and concentrations of these chemicals detected in urine during their mother's pregnancy. This is virtually impossible to do. Nevertheless, obviously trying to cut down exposure to substances that could be problematic, that's a no-brainer. But how to do it, that's a brainer. Because we don't want to give up all of the luxuries of modern life, whether it be the synthetic clothes that we wear or the cleaning agents that we use, or some of the preservatives that allow us to have a safe food supply. So certainly we want to be very, very careful. But the reason that we contend with these problems right now is because we can detect these chemicals in the urine. And that is really a consequence of the evolution of analytical chemistry. Today, with solid phase extraction and high-performance liquid chromatography, tandem mass spectrometry, one can detect down to part per trillion levels. What this means is hard to say. Unfortunately, our ability to gather data has outstripped our ability to interpret what the data means. And that for today is our cup of joe. Another 1,000 or so compounds just entered my body. Are they going to cause any mischief? I think in this case, not.